Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Vineker. If you don't know me already, I'm an autistic blogger of my own blog website, The World of Autism. And I've been doing not only that I share my own experiences being on the autism spectrum, I also have people that have come on to share their experiences, whether it be from autistic self advocates themselves to parents, teachers, therapists who are working with here who have family that has with children that are autistic, or being a therapist, a teacher that is working with autistic people. So you name it, we gather as a like community, so that way everybody gets the education about autism, and also with advocacy as well. And as you may know about with me, is that not only that I do this with guests where I'm always connecting and networking with everybody and having people on, I actually also in person, I help the disability community by being a paraprofessional, and I work as an RBT. So I have a lot that I do. I definitely have a lot. But let's get right into it with our latest guest here. His name is Merrick. How are you doing today, Merrick?
I'm doing okay.
Awesome. Awesome. So I want to start off with you getting to tell a little bit about yourself and being an autistic self-advocate, like about your journey.
So, I feel like if I talked a lot about this, it would take like hours and hours to talk about. But I guess what I can do is I can start with the fact that I was born in '86, so that basically would put me in between the crystallization of the diagnosis of autism. Also, the passing aways of two very, very important figures to the history of autism, Dr. Leo Kanner and Dr. Hans Asperger. And then on the other flip side, you also have the movie Rain Man, which was also very characteristic. So when I was a lot younger, I was diagnosed with PDD-NOS, or pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. My parents would go to these different support groups, and they would also put me into these special education classes because they really weren't too sure what to really do with me, because I guess you can say I was on the disability cutting edge, if that's such a thing. So it was, and it was a lot more, it was a lot more positive when finally in 1994, Asperger's syndrome, the term itself, hit the mainstream. And so that was my evolved diagnosis, one that I have lived with ever since, even if the 2013 uh, diagnostic manual, the DSM-5, or the DSM-4, I believe, it actually erased Asperger's syndrome from the terminology and only referred to autism as an umbrella, as the spectrum itself, but they didn't differentiate between different parts of the spectrum, which I'm not too thrilled about, but this was something that I had grown up with for years, even without having known about it. I would go to school, I would go to classes, I would be the weird kid, the eccentric kid. I would hug other students, I would slobber, my motor skills were severely imbalanced, and I had a very, very deep voice even at that time. So things were a little bit different for me. Needless to say, while I did experience bouts of bullying with kids who I thought I would try to entertain, and with others who would try to do all kinds of ways to get me into some kind of a trouble with either with the people around me or myself. I managed to get a few friends quite early. My best friend at the time in elementary school, I would have a what I thought was a healthy social relationship with. But in middle school, he turned out to be a little bit of a bully himself. And so I just didn't really know what to think about who I am, what I am. And it got even worse in high school when I had my first bouts of depression and anxiety in the 10th grade because of all these transitions in my life, which I wasn't used to. So I just didn't really know what to call whatever it was that was in my brain. I just thought to myself, well, everyone is different in some way, you know. Everyone has some kind of thing that makes them tick, and everyone has some kind of thing that makes them unique or special or different or whatever. So I thought to myself, well, you know, I'm not exactly cut to fit in too well, but I also would try to when I had the chance. So later on, my first exposure to autism was actually in the last 2 years of high school because we didn't have a study hall. And what ended up happening was my parents actually scheduled for me because I hated the cafeteria I went to. Full of noise, full of panic, full of all kinds of crazy sensory issues. And so instead, I would either go into the next class and eat my lunch there, or I would wait until I got home from school and ate my lunch, or I would go to the study hall kind of creation because we didn't have one. So you had the first one was nice, it was a one-on-one, and then the second one, I was moved into the school within a school called the Hannah More School. And the Hannah More School was a school that was dedicated to teaching individuals with autism, but it was a tiny classroom inside the high school that I went to, had a few students, had two teachers. And I was thinking to myself, okay, this is interesting, but it never really hit me that I was of the same diagnosis as the students in that class. And so I was just basically, I wouldn't say that I was completely ignorant, but I was a lot more focused on my mental health issues than I was in thinking that I had anything that could have, you know, a label or a name attached to it. Then, after I graduated from high school, I had to enroll in an independent living program as a prerequisite for college. And that's when it got revealed to me that I had Asperger's syndrome. And I thought to myself, and I always say that, and I say this constantly, you know, I was thinking a lot about what I can't do rather than what I can do. And so when I thought to myself about what I can do, it made me feel better. But it also made me feel a few truths about myself that actually would make sense. Then after that happened, I went to the program. I befriended another individual with a case of autism himself. And then after that, I went to college, graduated, worked at Best Buy for 6.5 years. And basically around that time, I was getting tired of working retail. So I went over to these different interviews uh, with papers that my aunt and uncle would send me about autism, and it would talk about the underemployment rate, the unemployment rate of people with autism. And I always would show up to these interviews with these statistics in my head. I didn't necessarily share any papers with the people who were doing the interview because I thought it would probably be inappropriate. But instead, I went over and I rattled off these statistics and I said, you know, I've been working this job for like 5 years, 6 years, however many years. And so, you know, maybe you should hire me or something like that. But unbeknownst to me, and I cannot prove this. When I got out of that room, it's a question as to whether or not they would be thinking to themselves, like one of the interviewers was like, oh, I have a cousin or I have a son with autism. And the interviewer, and so when I would leave, it would be like, did my bringing that all out, did my disclosure, basically it was the disclosure, did that hurt my chances of getting a job? And I kind of felt concerned, but I felt like there was little else that I can really talk to them about. Of course, I'm good at working, but any examples that I could think of would be, uh, you know, counterproductive in a way. Like I would accidentally sleep for like 4 or 5 hours into this Barnes and Noble job that I had for one day. Well, it wasn't a job that I had for one day, but it was like one of the last days that I was working there. I did that. Then I came in and I made up all those hours on that day. But, telling myself that, it seems like, well, I'm not lazy, I'm dedicated, I'm loyal. But to other people, it's like, yeah, you are lazy. So why are you even telling us this? Why are you even listing these as examples of how good of a worker you are? You really should have done your job and did this hours and did everything. And so to me, I guess maybe what I was doing was I was putting in a lot of bad examples as to why someone should hire me. And in a way, that's kind of like how I think sometimes is I think differently than what some other people interpret things as. And it's not exactly going to play the way that I think it is. I mean, it's when people say, do you go above and beyond? It's not like I went out there like Superman. When I'm working at retail, I'm merchandising, I'm pulling things off of a truck, I'm moving them places. I spent like 3 hours trying to find uh ladies Gladiator DVD or Blu-ray. Yeah, Blu-ray in the Blu-ray section, and that was above and beyond. But it's not like I saved people's lives or I did anything that I felt was above and beyond anything. So that and a lot of other things contributed to a growing sense of depression because I was getting rejected from all these interviews. I couldn't think of a way out. My interests were in writing and doing lyrics and poetry and songs and all that stuff, doing radio, and that was all very, very interesting to me. But it wasn't really getting me anywhere. And when I graduated from college, I kind of felt like I got a bachelor's degree in communications, which I could not do with a radio because of a few decisions I made back in college. And it was like, so what am I supposed to do? I felt like I was rudderless. And aunt and an uncle came over who missed my graduation. And they told me basically that they had a friend who has Parkinson's and she worked for a Parkinson's organization. So they asked me to to fill out things for like an autism organization. So I did. I take Palm Train Connections. So that's a public transportation service that transports the elderly and disabled. And and only in Palm Beach County. So the good thing is that one of the places that I contacted was a place that was very, very near to where I lived. So I was able to get in touch with him, same as Dick Busto. And then after that, I was able to get in touch with Dr. Toby Hansberger of one of the two charter schools we had. I think it was called the Renaissance Learning Academy at the time. And he had me in and was like, we can have you as a role model for a day or something. And I thought to myself, this is no way that can get me out of my retail job. I want something different. So I learned about Dr. Marlene Sotelo. I learned about the Else for Autism Foundation, and I sent a gibbering message, and Dr. Sotelo was like, okay, yeah, we'll see what we can do. Went in there, did an interview, did one day, then it went to two, went to three. And by August of that year, I was able to quit my job at the Best Buy because I had enough days and I had enough hours. By that time at Best Buy, I was sort of, I wasn't really doing much because I really wasn't interested in moving up in the company. There wasn't anything that was interesting to me. I don't like yelling at people. And I guess I could say that I was very much afraid, or I feared what would happen if I moved up in the company. If I went full time, then if I went, to a managerial position, I was very, very afraid because of my mental health and all the different things that went on in my mind. So I was working only a few days, and so I was able to say goodbye to them, and it just went moving up and up and up and up with the foundation. And I've been working with them. I'm actually one of the longest serving employees now. I've been working with them for 7 years, learning a lot about myself, learning a lot about others and about the field that we're all a part of, and just learning a lot more about the science and the methodologies and everything around the word autism, which I never would have really embraced as much before, because I was just afraid of telling someone, I have something that makes you different. I have a disability and this is what it is, and even if some other people would say, there's something very unique about it, I would still feel a little bit fearful about embracing it. And, sometimes I think to myself, would I rather just, forego thinking about any of this and just live on a farm or in the woods in a cabin or something and just forget about everything? Maybe sometimes, but also it's something that I can't really erase from my life. And I actually did do, before I was speaking to you, I did
Mhm.
do a 2 hour long podcast episode, which focused on Autistic Pride Day, and it did stories about fathers with autism and fathers of children with autism. And so basically, if my voice sounds a little bit rough, it's because of that. And also because, it's all very, very interesting how all of this sort of blends in after a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like just the fact that like you're with even just your journey in general, like about the fact that it's very different for people when it comes to the time when they're actually like learning about about their diagnosis and everything. For me, I actually found out the way I found out was when I was in 6th grade, and my family and I were at my family friend's house, and we were watching we were watching the documentary about Dr. Temple Grandin, as everybody knows of, and I my parents didn't like tell me directly. They could, but they were like trying to say like how about how like my thinking is kind of different, and like I'm definitely a visual thinker in a way, but at the same time I associate a lot with like words and like visuals at the same time. So it just, you know, like when people find out, I know for you, like in terms of transitions of everything, that it was difficult. And I know for me, like I remember my transition from middle school to high school was difficult. Like my high school, I'll tell you this, and people are still shocked to this day about this, is that whenever I tell this part, my high school had no idea, like no teacher or anybody had any idea that I had an IEP, because of the fact that where I was going to a different school that wasn't zoned for my town. So my middle school never transferred my IEP to the high school that I was attending. So the my freshman year was rough. Like I actually, and like where you were saying about with friendships, like how they were changing a lot. Like I know this happened to me too, that I had an acquaintance that I was starting to become friends with that I knew from middle school. And in our freshman year of high school, they completely changed and started just being mean to me and started spreading rumors for absolutely no reason about me. And but um but depending on like the support system, my parents were like telling me like you gotta advocate for yourself, and like you have to go talk to the school psychologist who was my case manager. But yeah, so it just, the way that we handle things is very different, obviously, but like, you know, um, this again, everybody has experiences of like how they deal with learning their diagnosis. And I know like for me, it helps me learn more about myself. And I could tell it did for you too. And where you're at now, like it's awesome that you wanted to get out of with working in retail because guess what? It's very common that I've heard and it's still going on nowadays about how many people who are on the spectrum or even with other people with disabilities that are working in retail still. And I think you agree about that.
Well, I think that part of what people may not notice is how so much of the employment world is so
Yes.
focused on a person-to-person interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if you have any social anxiety or social awkwardness, or you have difficulties verbalizing or communicating, you'll find it a lot more difficult to navigate through the employment world because so much of it is focusing on customer service, on unless you have a specialty or you specialize in something, we are so focused on interactions and communication to a point in which it's like the first jobs you can get, bagger at Publix. You have to help people out to the car at Publix. For those who listen to this who are not, part of the Southeast or anything like that, very, very big Southeast grocery chain. And,
Yes.
and so basically, you have to help people to the car, you have to, talk to people, you have to do this, do that. And you're selling things at a retail store, even merchandising, you're expected to help out a customer. And I don't know if this is something to do with autism, but one of my biggest problems when I was working at Best Buy was I would be in the middle of a project. Let's say it's a big project. Let's say I have to alphabetize this whole section, or I have to take things out and put things in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm doing all this, and all of a sudden, a customer comes up to me and asks me, "Do you know where I can find?" And it's all the way at a different part of the store. So I go to a completely different part of the store. I come back and I lost my place. And it takes me 30 minutes to find what I lost. Whether it's a item or product or it's something else, it would take me a lot of time to try to
Mm-hmm.
piece everything back together because of that interruption. That minor interruption would distract me so much to a point in which at one point I said, I would rather work at a Best Buy if there were no customers in the store.
Mm.
And unfortunately, that's not exactly something that can happen because you're expected to spend part of your life at Best Buy on the floor. And I think it's the same with any other retail store. It's not like you can just unless you work at a warehouse, but that wasn't exactly my future. That wasn't exactly the bread and butter of what I was doing. Instead, I was working at this retail store, and I would go into our warehouse. I would manage the truck, and then Black Friday would come, and it would just be awful. It would be absolutely awful. And I think that was another reason why I decided to get out of there. Um, So yeah, it's tough, it's difficult, and it's hard. And it would be great if there's like a database or like something that says, here's all the beginning jobs you can do. And this is, if you're this specific personality type, or if you have this kind of this condition or that kind of condition, here are all the different things you can do. And I don't think that there's a site like that, but it would be good for people to know that you don't have to start off in the workforce bagging groceries at Publix or expecting to interact with customers every single day of your life.
Yes, that's, you know what, like this is where we have to really try to, and this is from like the very beginning, like as soon as like middle school, that we need to keep pushing on interests. because the more that we're keep on motivating like people's interests, like especially autistic people, the more that we are motivating with interest, the more that that they're gonna see a lot more autistic people in different places and everything. You
You
know?
sound like a member of.
Wait, what? Your voice is off, Merrick. I don't know why.
Oh, yeah. I was gonna say, you sound a lot like a member of.
I don't know what's going on. The voice.
Oh, oh. Sometimes I think I accidentally hit the mute button on my
Yeah,
microphone.
I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't try to hold on to the mic. Maybe that's the natural state of things. But no, you do sound like a member of my advisory board, because I could swear that one of the members of the advisory board for the Else for Autism Foundation, he would exactly say that. And he would do that, and he would be like, we got to focus on interest. We got to focus on interest.
Mhm.
And to me, it's really a no-brainer, no matter who the person is, you got to focus more on interest, figure out how to adapt that to something that makes sense, instead of just
Exactly.
pulling everyone into the same bin and going, hey, you may not like clothes, but here you go working at TJ Maxx, and you work it with clothes and everything. Here you go, you just do something like that. And it's just like, okay, that's good, that's fine, but what do you see as your future? How are you going to advance? Are you going to become a manager? Oh, I really like that brand, or I really like that design. And the other person's like, who's supposed to be the manager, is like, what brand? What design? I'm into movies, okay? And how many DVDs are sold at TJ Maxx, How many Blu-rays are sold at TJ Maxx? Oh, yeah. I mean, unless you're into like the different foods and the gourmet stuff that they sell at a place like that, it's just, you know, where does that, where, how, it's almost like you need some kind of how can I say it, an engineer. You need a group of engineers to go and say, where do you begin? Where do you go from there? And where do you end? Because if you don't, then it's just sort of like, okay. I mean, part of the problem was when I was going to high school, when they started doing lessons on careers and the like, they were teaching you how to be good at an interview, expecting you to graduate from a college and go to some kind of, big business job. And not everyone can do that. And so at the high school, at the foundation I work for, they actually have vocational training. They have, simulations of retail stores, of grocery stores,
That's awesome.
because not everyone is going to graduate from high school or the like, and
That's
they're going to
another,
go to a
yeah,
Fortune 500 company.
that's, that's a really great point, because of the fact that, like, the whole key is getting to being as independent as you can be. That's the whole point. Doesn't matter like what your route is in life exactly. It's not going to be a perfect route. Like, I thought I was going to be staying as a paraprofessional forever, but I ended up, like, a year and a half later, I ended up going back to college and pursuing it fully online. And now I'm working in the ABA field. So I'm like, so it's like completely different route. And like for you, like how much of your experiences, like how you've now been working for ELS for autism, and like you're so involved, like doing with the podcast, like you were talking about with the topic you were talking about with Autistic Pride Day, and also to mention that you are also involved with the Florida APSE. If you want to tell a little bit more about that,
Okay, so
just like a little like brief about it.
so it's my birthday on Sunday, the 19th. And so I felt like it was important that during that week, because I'm a big nerd and Electronic Entertainment Expo was canceled. So my big video game festival was not on. And so instead, I was able to go over to the National APSE conference. APSE means Association for People Supporting Employment First. And the whole idea is to get people with disabilities to get jobs. They talk about competitive integrated employment. And the whole idea is to get people with disabilities working with people without disabilities in competitive environments so that they can get wages, they can get paid advancements, promotions. And, to me, what is most important is the idea that people with disabilities, if they're able to, that they can work and they can be able to get a job that's much more entitled to integrity than just basically, doing something as, a symbol of something else. So it was a very, very interesting, it's been a very, very interesting experience being on that board for like 5 years. They needed someone with a disability on the board, and I decided to throw my hat in because autism isn't just one part of what I call the disability advocacy crown. One point of the crown is physical, one point is neurological, and one point is probably like mental, I think. No, sensory or sense-ridden, because you have physical, you have paraplegics. Neurological could be anything from schizophrenia to autism. You could say autism. And then also the third point of the crown is like blindness, deafness. In some ways you can say, because motor skills and senses may involve a little bit of the physicality, there can be a way to trace and say that autism is more than just, one or two things. It's like a wide variety of a collection of different symptoms. And so I was able to convince them, to persuade them to allow me through as a member of the board. And
That's
it's been
amazing.
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely amazing. And it comes to show like about how much you've grown like with advocacy work and everything, and like helping people with employment. And that's like, and it's a great way to end with this, because just the point that like how much that we need to keep on like adapting. The key is adapt. Like if workplaces adapt, then it can be better for everybody, and to help everybody in general. So it was definitely a great way to wrap this up. And I want to thank you so much, Merrick, for coming on to do this this episode with you.
Okay, thank you, future Dr. Vinogrove.
That's so cool. You actually said my last name, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, people have trouble with my last name too, so.
No problem. Thanks.